Passport. People talk about passport. Hey, lots of people told me, why don't you get a Canadian passport first? Take the citizenship, apply for citizenship, and take the passport and go. And lots of people do that. I thought about it, but to me it made no sense. I said, see, listen, I cannot waste my time living in this country just to get the passport, all right? And second thing is, even though I travel a lot, but lots of people don't travel that much. Still, why do they need that passport?
Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Desi Written. Today, I'm really excited to have Himanshu on our show. Himanshu has been outside India for almost close to 18 years, spending time in Asia Pacific, Canada, working on a fintech, helping a lot of banks on the management side, on the business side, and finally decided to move back to India about a year back. I'm looking forward to a lot of discussions in terms of lifestyle in Asia Pacific, North America, the reasons to move back to India and how the life has been after the move, especially after spending close to 2 decades outside India. With that, welcome Himanshu to the show.
Thanks, Avinash. Thanks, everybody. Hi, everybody.
Yeah, Himanshu, so if you can share a bit background about you, and what made you to move outside the India and the reasons or the trigger points to consider to move back to India. I think that would be very helpful.
Right, thanks. I'm Himanshu Ahuja, and I'm a financial engineer and a management consultant. I have close to 2 decades of experience in financial technology and financial engineering. Worked with lots of international industrial banks in Asia Pacific, in Europe, and in North America. I've been based out of Singapore for almost 18 years, and a couple of years in Canada as well. And during this time, I had an opportunity to liaise with our clients in the financial technology industry globally. Now, I started my international career in 2007, so that is 18 years ago. And I'm back in India. I came back to India last year. Now, when I started my career, I was doing all right. I started my career in Gurgaon, and I was working with a bank indirectly through one of the major tech companies based out of India. At that time, I was doing satisfactorily in my career, but then I felt that that was a time to experiment a bit, to see the world around, and there came that opportunity to move to Singapore. I joined a top IT company. I joined Oracle, and through Oracle, I had a chance to Oracle based out of Singapore, and through that, I worked with Citibank Japan. So that was my first international project, and I was based in Singapore and in Japan.
Got it.
Yeah, so that was that. And the initial idea was to just be there for some time. In fact, I thought I'll be there just for 6 months and then I'll just come back. But then I somehow ended up being there for a few years. And I ended up becoming a permanent resident in Singapore, and eventually became a permanent resident of Canada as well. For a change, I thought, I had spent a few years in Singapore, in Asia Pacific. I pretty much traveled across the length and breadth of Asia Pacific through Singapore, and especially in the countries surrounding Singapore, Malaysia, Indonesia, and Bali. In Indonesia, and then the Philippines, Hong Kong, Japan, Australia, and New Zealand. So that was that. So it was time for me to try something else. So Singapore is beautiful. There's no doubt. I pretty much liked Singapore, and I think everything was fine. But then when I got married in 2014, we started thinking differently about relocating. So we applied for Canadian migration as well. I think it's pretty straightforward, actually. You can just apply to Canadian government's website and apply right there. And there was this express entry program initiated by them in 2013 16 or 17. We applied in 17, I think, and we got through pretty quickly. And then we started planning for it, and we traveled to Canada in 19, and then we spent a few months, and then we just came back. I was still employed in Singapore at that time, so so it was more of a break I had taken, a small break in Canada, and then we thought that we'll probably return to Canada later, and then I went to Canada again in 22, at 22 after COVID. During COVID, everything there was stalled. There were pretty much no flights at that time, so we had this opportunity. There was a culture of work from home at that time. People were working from home, and so we used that opportunity to work from Canada. Spent about 18 months or so in Canada, and used that opportunity to travel in Canada through the length and breadth from Vancouver to Toronto, and then to the United States as well, from New York to California to Florida and all. But then eventually we decided that, somehow we thought that we are probably better off just going back to India. And so we kept reviewing our decision. We kept thinking about it. We took our time. We were discussing pretty much every day, about what's best for us. And we realized that it's probably best to just be in India. And we had our own reasons. If you like, I can delve deeper into those reasons, but that's that actually.
Okay, that's great. Yeah, no, thanks a lot for giving that, a good overview of your background and the time that you spent, especially for the last close to 20 years outside the India. So maybe just a couple of quick questions so that I understand and, maybe a little bit color to the audience. So when you said, spending quite a bit of time in the Asia Pacific, right? Were you always based in Singapore and traveling, or did you actually move from one country to the other country as like a resident of that country? Just curious on that.
I was based in Singapore, and for the best part of my life, through the best part of my international career. But I used to travel from Singapore wherever required. To any other place. But yeah, I was based out of Singapore. Yes.
And just curious, like any reason to consider moving to Canada from Singapore? Anything that you can shed some light on that, and then we can come back to this, the reasons to move back to India.
Well, Singapore is, we thought Singapore is pretty expensive. That's one thing. It's expensive. It was expensive back then, and it has now become even more expensive actually after COVID. If we look at the cities around the world, today it's Singapore and New York. They are pretty much at par. They are the most expensive places in the world today, Singapore. A few years ago, it was still all right, but now it is very expensive. That's one of the major reasons. Second thing was my wife. She was she couldn't really make a mark in Singapore. It's hard to actually, to be honest, Singapore immigration is pretty hard, to be honest. So, for example, my wife, she couldn't get to the Singapore residency permit, although she could work there. But she is an architect, and she is in a licensed profession. So she had some difficulties operating out of Singapore, and the problem was Singapore put a lot of restrictions on non-residents like us. There were lots of restrictions, so that's the reason why we considered moving out of Singapore. There were lots of restrictions. For example, you cannot buy a house. Landed house is expensive anyway, so now we are talking about the apartments. Even the apartments, we were restricted from buying an apartment, for example. I was not able to buy an apartment. And not even in the secondary market, because it takes at least two residents, a family nucleus of two residents to be eligible for those apartments. Private apartments were very expensive. Even a few years ago, a private apartment was more than $1 million at that time. Yeah, so it's an apartment, it's not a landed house, right? A landed house is like 10 million, 15 million plus. So that's the reason why I say it's expensive.
Yeah.
So that's the thing. And when they put these kind of restrictions on you, then you don't feel settled.
Yeah.
And my kids are going to school, and because they are not residents, so that means we should pay the fees for my kids to send them to a private school or whatever. So while the locals go to the local school for free, our kids would go to the same school, and we end up paying $4,000. So that we thought was a bit unfair. And so that was that. Basically, we were not settled, and it didn't make any sense to continue there. So we thought, why not?
Yeah.
Something else. Then we thought about Canada. And so like I said, we got Canadian residency through express entry as well. But Canada, to be honest, it's a tough nut to crack. When we went there, we thought it would be a fine place. The Canada advertises itself pretty well on the internet, and I think it's kind of misleading, I would say. Yeah, we were in Singapore when we applied for Canada immigration, and often I would see immigration lawyers coming to our office and talking about Canada, about taking us to Canada, helping us immigrate. But we kind of didn't really entertain them much. We just went to the Canadian government's website and applied it, and we got the first attempt. So, because there was no point in paying them, and then with that uncertainty of whether you make it or not make it. In fact, we were a bit confused, because when we saw some advertisements there with people giving 100% confirmation of a permanent residency and of a job offer, that itself was a red flag to us, to be honest. And I often ask myself, how come somebody give us confirmation of a job and the confirmation of a residency in these countries,
Yeah.
So that itself was a red flag at that time. But still, we thought that, okay, we have not paid a fortune for this, so we got this by merit, so why not just try it?
Yeah.
So when we went to Canada, everything felt like a scam to me, to be honest, if you ask me. The entire country seems to rely on an immigration program to attract immigrants by saying that, they've got the best quality of life anywhere in the world. And they talk about anything and everything under the sun that they have it. And it's mostly policy-based, all of that. They won't talk about infrastructure, but everything else. See, there are two things. One is the tangible, and second thing is intangibles, right? Tangible is what you can see and touch. Intangible is something that you can just feel. Singapore, we know, is a city that has the world's best infrastructure, and we can see it. The best city in the world with the best infrastructure, and you see that. When you drive on the road, you see it's got the best roads, it's got the best infrastructure physically, you can see it. You'll see that, it takes hard work, blood and sweat to build a city like that. You see those all the skyscrapers, you look at fantastic healthcare that you get in Singapore, and all those public programs. So that is the tangible thing. It's an Asian country. People look at it, people have their own thoughts about it. Some people say that, is this even a democratic government? And some people question it. It is a democracy, but yes, it's not like a liberal democracy like you have in Norway or Sweden. But it is a democracy. You cannot say that it's not a democracy. It works within the democratic system, yes. Canada, on the other hand, there's not much tangible, not much to see. The infrastructure is pretty average there. Everything is mostly based on intangible things such as fresh air. You enjoy fresh air, or fresh air coming from the North Pole. Fresh water, those natural resources. Yes, good. But what has the government done about it? What has the government done to build the infrastructure? It's just huge country, Canada. It's probably the second largest country in the world with the huge landmarks. But where is the infrastructure? What has the government done? It's bringing, and what is the population of that country? It's about 36 to 40 million people, and that is through running immigration programs by attracting people to Canada from all over the world. People have moved to Canada, but where is the infrastructure? Where is the housing? Is there enough housing? This is a large country and it's a developed country, but unfortunately, I think it's a badly run country. You're calling people, but where are the houses? Where are the people going to live? And in a huge country like Canada, which has no dearth of landlords, how come the houses are so expensive?
Yeah.
It costs almost the half the price in the United States, which is just next door to the south, Canada. Often the houses in Canada, in Toronto, in Vancouver, somebody was telling me an average house costs $1.5 million in a world. In Toronto, it was like 1.3 million average house prices until the 22 and 23. And until the rate hike, when the Central Bank of Canada increased the rate of interest. So the problem was that, first of all, we were all worried about the weather, living at that latitude in Canada. We have heard that it's pretty cold. We knew it's cold. We knew that. So that was the only problem we thought. So minus 10 degrees, minus 20, sometimes on rare days it's like minus 30. So it's like very cold and windy conditions. For 6 months here, you've got snow cover. And in general, you've got 9 months of cold, 9 months out of 12 months of cold. People are usually indoors for 9 months. 3 months you're outside, which is fine, all right. So, but we thought that was the only problem, but that wasn't to be. You've got so many problems there. First of all, housing itself is a big problem. A house that costs $1.3 million, who's going to afford it? An average person cannot afford it, first of all. Even if no bank is going to give you a loan also. The average income of the Canadian households Canadian per capita income is roughly about $50,000 per person.
Yeah.
And husband and wife combined together, they will probably earn $100,000. And together they will qualify for a loan of $450,000 to $500,000.
Yeah.
But housing cost is $1.2 million. Even if no bank is going to give that much loan, who's going to afford that house? I'm talking in general, right? You have exceptions, which is fine. You can find people who can earn $1 million, $500,000, which is fine. But I'm talking in general, this is the thing. In general,
common themes that I heard, like people who lived in Canada, like the housing, the inflation, infrastructure, and even with the housing, the people, I was surprised. This is something news to me, that the interest rate changes every 5 years. So this is not like you can't have like a fixed 30-year mortgage like what you typically see in US or something like that. So when the central bank has to change the interest rate, it actually impacts the people with their mortgage payment, and that makes it hard because they can't plan like what they have to pay for the mortgage. It's just so much of stress for people there. I mean, these are some of the things that I heard.
Yeah. Now, Canada's economy is struggling. First of all, we have had macro effects around the world. We have had wars in Ukraine, and probably a potential war which may happen on the eastern front between China and Taiwan. China saying that they will take Taiwan and all those threats that they made. It has basically made it difficult, and we are living in times where you have super inflation. And then now we have trouble in Israel as well. So these things don't help. Right. People and countries going to war. These things don't help. They have driven up inflation, no doubt about that. We have had aftermath of COVID. The housing crisis has emerged after COVID.
Yeah.
You look at the air tickets, what used to cost people would travel one way from India to say Canada or US in $700 or $800 in economy ticket. What's the cost of the ticket now? I was just checking 3 days ago. It's almost $3,000 or more. $3,000 to $400. Almost $3,000 to $3,500 one way to Canada.
Really?
One way ticket.
Yeah,
So that was the last one.
Yeah. I know the inflation is true, and I heard, I think it's also like, I think the competition is less. I think, there's a lot of monopoly, especially like there are only 2 airlines in Canada that, they just like keep increasing. The banks, the same situation. That's what I heard. I think there is no competitive landscape to able to provide better services to the, citizens of Canada. It just makes it much more harder.
Bang on, you're right. So, well, we have spoken about housing crisis. First of all, there are lots of students who have moved to Canada because of whatever reason. It's a huge industry in Canada. Lots of international students going there. They cannot find housing. They cannot find a house to to live in. There are no jobs. The economy is failing. It's crippling economy. Even students cannot find a job, a minimum job. They cannot. What's the minimum? $15 an hour is the minimum. It's the minimum labor rate in Canada. $15 an hour, right? Students cannot find part-time jobs, right? So basically, it's a crippling economy. First of all, there are not enough jobs. It's a cold economy. A cold economy is when where it's difficult to find a job first, and let alone a great job. People are struggling to find even survival jobs, and hard to find a job in the first place. Second, if you lose your job, then what? Then you are sitting at home for another 6 months or 1 year looking for another job, and all, right? They give you some employment insurance, all right, but that is not sufficient actually to pay your bills, to pay your mortgages, or to pay your what do you call it, sustenance bills.
Yeah.
So living in a cold weather in minus 10 degrees or freezing weather conditions, 0 degree or minus 10 for 6 months or 9 months and 9 months worth of cold, then in a crippling economy, and paying huge mortgages where most people will not even qualify for a bank loan. Hard to find a job, and you lose a job, again you are struggling to find another job, right? What's going to pay on? How do you pay those bills? See, when you live in a country, in a foreign country, think about all those uncertainties, and schooling is okay, it's fine. Some people think it's good, some people say it's not good. So it's like I do not want to comment on that.
Yeah.
So that's fine actually. But I believe the initial schooling is pretty pretty easy on students. There's not enough pressure on my kids were going to school out there, but my kids are pretty small actually, so they are fine. But they say that pressure usually comes later on and in the later years of schooling,
Yeah.
Is good or bad is people can decide. But if you live in Canada, yes, especially if you spend the later years of schooling in Canada, then it's hard to actually adjust to India or to Asia, to Asian schooling.
Sure.
It's difficult for sure. I mean, whether you talk about Singapore or you talk about India, the schooling system is pretty aggressive there in Asia. In entire Asia, I'm not talking about India, but
Yeah, I understand. So yeah, thanks, Himanshu. So I mean, I understand. I think some of the challenges or some of the things that you have to go through in Canada. But curious, like why India in specific? Because you have lived in Singapore for quite so many years. Why not any other country? Yeah, just
actually about Canada, I wanted to tell you a bit more about the healthcare. A lot of people think that in old age that they need healthcare, which is absolutely right. But Canada has a crippling healthcare system as well. People are not able to see a doctor and specialist.
Yeah.
And there are huge waiting lines for several months. And so India, well, I tell you what, see, we considered many things. We could have moved to the US as well. You live in Canada, become a citizen, then move to US on a TN visa. But the thing is, the thing is, on a TN visa, your spouse cannot work, or the spouse must get her own TN visa first of all. Then you may end up in different cities looking for your respective jobs. So that pretty much can break apart the family, and it's hard to find that stability then. Then US has its own set of problems. You might know more about the US issues than me. See, the thing is, it's not worth it, to be honest. That kind of instability is not worth it. It's simply not worth it. At our age, if you're young, if you're dynamic, then by all means go and experiment, see the world around, go wherever. But as you mature, if you're into your 40s already, then we'll just rethink already, because you've got kids. You've got kids who are growing up, right? You want to provide them with stability, and be stable in wherever you are. Make friends there. You're going to make friends, and you make friends for life. You're going to find your life partners. You're going to meet your friends and your potential life partners. Be stable wherever you are.
Sure.
So find that stability. And then ultimately, um, like I said, housing is a big thing, I would say, especially when you're living overseas. So people want to buy a house because they think that that's one way to save money. Uh, if you get into a 20-year mortgage, then buy a house and save money, and because it will, it will probably have some appreciation. It will probably have some capital gains over the 20-year period, and you save on rent and all. So that was when we were on in an equitable market, but that is not the situation anymore these days. If you in the olden days when the rate of interest was 2%, 2.5%, it made a lot of sense when the houses were more affordable. Today, that is not the situation. The housing is not affordable. In Canada, I told you, the house that should cost $500,000 is already 1.2, 1.3 million. Rate of interest that was supposed to be 2% is now 6%. It doesn't make any sense. You cannot afford it. Healthcare is such big time. So you have to be stable where you go. I could have returned to Singapore as well. But again, Singapore is pretty expensive. So we are growing. We wanted that stability. And I think India can provide that stability, first of all. Another thing is, like I always said that we lived in all these places and life has been pretty difficult no matter where you go, right? And why do you accept another country's problems rather than accepting your own country's problems? We talked about India's problems. We have India. India has its own share of problems, but why don't we accept our own problems first, and instead of just accepting another country's problem? No matter where you go, there's going to be a problem.
Sure.
So
So thanks for sharing that. I think it's a stability which makes sense, especially for the growing kids, kind of providing that environment and, being in that place. With that, so just curious, like, how did you decide which place you want to move to in India? Do you already have some place in mind, or is it based on the job, or is it just based on the family? Just curious on that.
actually, it's based on the job, no doubt. For starters, we moved to Gurgaon, which is North India, close to Delhi NCR region. I've grown up in that region, so it naturally occurred to me to be there. And we are an expanding company. We have an office coming out shortly in India. At this moment, we don't know the exact location. We are in a pre-sale stage of that. But we do have some clients in Delhi capital region. And we have one in Delhi, one in Mumbai, and a couple of them. In fact, not just one. We have got a couple of them in Delhi and a couple of them in Mumbai. So it made more sense to be located closer to those clients, so that you can serve them better. Yeah.
Okay, cool. So for how long has this planning been in works? Right. I think once you made a decision, Canada is not for you. You have decided to move back to India. So how long was that before you actually took the flights and then came to India? So if you can talk a little bit about your planning, especially for someone who has been living abroad for so many years, whether it's with the kids' education, whether it's your career transition, financial, just some of the logistics, I think that would be very helpful.
Right. So we were living in Toronto, and it was a rented apartment. We now bought a house there. And so we had a 1-year lease running at that time, and we were kind of thinking what to do. Yeah. Should we renew this lease, or should I just not renew it? Should I just finish off this contract and then I just move? So job itself wasn't a problem at that time because I could always be based in India, and my company had no problems with that. So that helped, to be honest. That helped. But regardless of that, I would say you can always find a job in India. It's not, it shouldn't be such a problem. Yeah. And live anywhere in India, it doesn't matter, to be honest. But it's good to live where you're more comfortable, where you come from, where you think you're more comfortable. But during our planning, we considered many places. From weather perspective, we thought of Bangalore, and from IT jobs perspective, we thought about Bangalore as well. Then we had Pune as an option. So we had those thoughts, And then we thought from the retirement perspective as well, because when we do all this planning of moving from one country to another, we usually have a long-term plan.
Yeah.
Why do we move to Canada? Because first of all, we were all permanent residents, so we thought that we are going to be stable there. We don't depend on the visa. That's one thing. Second, we thought we would be able to buy a house. Third, there's a healthcare in the old age, right? So those were the thoughts that we had, but nothing works actually in Canada.
Yeah.
Yeah, housing doesn't work, healthcare doesn't work.
Sure,
Then
yeah.
what works? How do you live there then? So another question was, in India, you could actually potentially be considered, as Indians, we pretty quickly move overseas. We have this thought of living overseas, but how many of us actually think about moving to another state?
Yeah.
So those were the thoughts that I had at the time. We had those discussions with my friend as well, that how come, so easily we are prompted to relocating overseas, but we don't even consider, we have not even seen enough of India. How many of us have actually seen India? How many places have we been to? And have we ever considered living in a different state? We have got some really interesting places where we can work, where we can retire. You look at the coastal regions of the country, for example. You could potentially look at Trivandrum, for example, or you can look at Mangalore, or maybe Kochi or Goa. These are pretty nice places. Or maybe up there in north, near the hills, near the mountains. How many of us actually thought about it? I once spoke about this to a fan who lives in London, and he said, he plans to live in Goa when he retires. And I was like, all right, I was thinking on the same lines. So it kind of quickly resonated what he said, and it made sense to me.
Okay.
So while we work, we can pretty much work. We can live where our work takes us, but otherwise, India has a lot to offer actually.
Sure.
Yeah.
So if I understand that, I think you have this 1-year lease, and then you pretty much decided that might be a right time to move. And I know you kind of touched about on a career-wise. I think you had the opportunity to do an internal transfer, so I think that kind of makes it a smooth transition. In terms of the kids' education, or in terms of any of the logistics, anything that you want to highlight, anything specific that you want to share from your perspective for the transition when moving back to India?
See, it was pretty simple for us, to be honest, logistic-wise, from kids' education perspective. So it's like from moving from one school to another. My son now was in a Toronto District Board school in Toronto. We just had to pull him out and pull him to another school, and we made that arrangement sitting in Canada itself. We called the school up and we discussed that, and we just get admission here, and they were fine. So that was pretty smooth as well. We got the admission back. And logistic-wise, there wasn't much. We sold off some of household stuff that we had on marketplace, and that's it. Actually, we could only bring back our bags. We never used any international shipping for logistics. Yeah, we just brought whatever we could in an aeroplane, right?
Yeah.
So nothing else actually.
Okay.
And so that was pretty straightforward for us. But yes, what's challenging for us is to find the right housing at the moment. So we have got an apartment on rent, and we are living there. But I eventually want to buy a house. So this is where I will have to put in some effort and decide where I want to live. But again, the thing is, the situation in India is a bit different to some of the other countries. See, the interest rates, the housing interest rates in India were always on the higher side, 7%, sometimes 9, sometimes 10%. Now it's around 10%, I believe. Right? So India is never a place where you like to get into a huge mortgage. But in Western countries or elsewhere, people are used to getting into huge mortgages. They get a bigger house, the salaries are slightly on the higher side, and interest rates are favorable. But now the things have changed.
Yeah.
Now the housing the houses have become more expensive and more unaffordable, and the bank rates have become higher. So that pretty much neutralizes the advantage that those countries have.
Yeah.
In India, on the other hand, it was the same as it used to be. Housing is now an interesting proposition for investment at higher interest rates, and the property itself is expensive, or the rate of interest are expensive. Right. So it pretty much is evens out in both the places. So you take your next step properly. And see, when you're working, you don't know for how long you're going to be based in one city. You can get a transfer from here to there. You can move around. So, but then from that perspective, if you know where you're going to retire, then pretty much you can go and make that investment there, and you're good.
Okay, cool. So how has the life been in India? I know you kind of touched a little bit about the, an aspect of the housing, which is, I think, a different story. But I know like it's been about a year for you and the family. And how has it been like adjusting in India? I don't know how old your kids are. So, if you can talk a little bit about the adjustment, I think that would be fantastic.
Well, so to be honest, we felt relieved when we were on the flight from Canada to India. We were like, man, 16 hours of flight. We were on the airplane, and it was a direct flight to Delhi at that time. And thankfully, we were not living in Regina or South, those kind of places, Saskatchewan and all. Right. Where first you have to go to Toronto and then get the flight from there and then to Delhi. It was a direct flight, and yet it was an hour-ending flight. We thought 16 hours of flight, and it was torture to be on that flight. At the moment we landed, the weather was the day we took off from Toronto. The weather was very sultry, and it was all black and brown, everywhere. There was melting snow, trees without leaves and all, and it was pretty gloomy, and it was raining. So, nevertheless, and after that, a long flight back home, and we were pretty relieved, to be honest. And what a relief it was! It was in February that we took that flight, and it was pretty cold in Canada at that time. And when we arrived there, it was such a relief, and our experience has been great. We feel that the stress has gone, to be honest. Yeah, we feel a lot relieved being here. We think, the thing is, if you've lived overseas and you have saved some money, then that money is best utilized. You get the best value for your money when you're in India. Right. So that stress has gone from the financial perspective. The stress has gone emotionally. That stress has gone. You're closer to your near ones and dear ones, closer to your family, to your sister, to your mother, to your friends. So we feel a lot happier, a lot more comfortable. From kids' perspective, they are fine. My kids are small, actually. It's 6. My kids are 6 and almost 4. Yeah, I've got 2 kids. So they are fine. They're pretty young at the moment. And to be honest, I didn't want my kids to be lost to some foreign culture in a place like Canada. Singapore was still fine, to be honest. I tell you, from that perspective, Singapore seems to be a proper country. It is a great country. It is a good country, and they have a way of life, right? And what is a country? When all people converge together, they have the similar thoughts of nationalism, and they have one common belief system and a way of life, and that is a country, right? But in Canada, there was none of it. You got immigrants from all over the world, from India, from Pakistan, from Bangladesh, from Afghanistan, from Morocco, from entire Africa. And to be honest, this is another propaganda that we thought that Canada promotes. So that it's a melting point for various cultures, and I think that doesn't make any sense to me. It's complete nonsense. I just don't feel comfortable with my kids mingling with everybody. Mingling is fine. You make friends, it's still all right. But I don't want that my kids end up closing up or kind of choosing such people as their life partners. I was just not comfortable with that idea. Randomly, if my kids grow up in that culture, and they say, "See, I know I've got my life partner from Morocco suddenly, or from all these places."
Yeah,
I think it's unmanageable to me, to be honest. And That made no sense to me, to be honest. There's no way of life in Canada. Where is the way of life in Canada? You've got people from all over the world. They have their own thoughts. They come with their own belief system.
Yeah.
You tell me, where is that convergence of thought? People coming from India, Pakistan, Afghanistan, Bangladesh, Morocco, all over Africa. And all these third world countries, people are migrating to Canada. And now these days, I rarely see people from Europe moving to Canada. But anyway, regardless of what it is, I found a lot, some Americans moving there or getting an internal transfer, whatever it was. But there was no convergence of thought. There was no feeling of nationalism there.
Yeah. Okay. Cool. I'm just being mindful of the time. So I know we have covered a bit about, the reasons to move back, and sounds like I think the family has settled well. Kids are doing great, I am, because they're still in the early stages now of their life. So anything that we haven't covered that you would like to bring up for people who are thinking about moving back to India? I think that would be very valuable for them.
Sorry, could you say that again? What's the question again?
Oh, the question was anything that we haven't covered that would be valuable from your perspective for people who are moving from either Canada or Asia Pacific or any other places, if they're considering to move to India, anything that you would share or you would advise them?
Well, I would say if you're considering relocating to India, I don't know, to be honest, what's the advice I can give them. But no, I'm really not sure, to be honest. What can I advise them? See, these people who are relocating to India, they're probably born here, they are raised here, so they pretty much know India. They know India pretty well, right? Even if you lived overseas for 2 decades or more, you still know India, unless you say that you never had a chance to visit India in those 20 years. I've been based in Singapore, and I was traveling to India pretty frequently, and even from Canada, I traveled to India. So, and I had family and friends here, so I've been in constant touch with them. I don't think I have any specific advice. I cannot tell people where to go and what to do.
Sure.
Just do what you think you like to do, and yeah. So I think probably one advice I can give them is look for mental peace. Is what I will tell them. Don't put yourself under stress, and because to be honest, when I relocated, we had those couple of thoughts that we are going to India. It's like we are going to see a lot of madness on the road, and lots of traffic, and environmental pollution, whether it is sound pollution or it is water pollution, and etc. etc. You got to live with it. You got to perhaps keep an eye closed and not look at something that you don't like it. I mean, think maturely, and the maturity comes with that experience and exposure. So you spent years overseas, and you've kind of gotten adjusted to a way of living. But when you return to India, keep one eye closed. It doesn't matter to us, to be honest, if you see some poverty, some poor people somewhere, or you see some dust or some pollution, air pollution or water pollution. Keep one eye closed and see how to ignore it and how you can add value to that country. And what's the use of living overseas and seeing great things if you cannot bring back something and try to improve your own country? Try and improve where you can. In fact, I was talking to one of my friends, and we thought, how we can actually improve. We talk about great landscapes overseas, of how green, the country is and all. How and why we cannot do it here in India. I know government cannot do everything, but we should look at how we can make this country a better place, how we can improve the environmental conditions here, how we can plant more trees and improve our urban planning and rural planning, and how we can actually improve the landscape of the country. What we can do, we should do, but otherwise we should probably think of how we can help anybody achieve that goal, and how we can bridge the gap further. The gap has been bridged already. India it's not the same India of 25 years ago, right? This country has bridged the gap. And think at the brighter side, think at the positive side. This is an old world country. It has that heritage and culture that is missing in some of the countries, new world countries like US or Canada or even Australia, New Zealand, and all these places. To be honest, man, I was in Singapore, like I said earlier. It's the city, it's the country with the world's best infrastructure, and moving to Canada was a step, not just a step. It was probably several steps downgrade for us, and we thought the infrastructure is actually pretty average, and we just could not like it. And I was living close to, say, a metro station, a train station, a subway station. Pretty average. It was damn cold, first of all. Freezing weather, 0, -10, -20 type weather. Still, you're sitting out in the open. You look at the bus stops, what kind of bus stops they have, what kind of infrastructure they have. In the name of a bus stop, they don't even provide you with an enclosure where you can actually sit and wait for the bus in freezing weather, where you're -10 with cold winds, gusting winds blowing, yeah? So you're pretty much standing out in the open in that weather. Just imagine where is the infrastructure? What is this the infrastructure that you talk about? You look at the railway stations, pretty average. I can tell you, even some of in the railways or the public infrastructure in India is much better than Canada. So the only thing is the environmental things like water pollution, air pollution. Where Canada has the edge, but other than that, there's absolutely nothing. Absolutely nothing. Passport. People talk about passport. Hey, lots of people told me, why don't you get a Canadian passport first? Take a citizenship, apply for citizenship, and take the passport and go. And lots of people do that. I thought about it, but to me, it made no sense. I said, see, listen, I cannot waste my time living in this country just to get the passport, okay? And second thing is, even though I travel a lot, but lots of people don't travel that much. Still, why do they need that passport? And frankly, when you travel, you don't just need a passport. You also need the money. And if you know how much it costs for a travel for a family of four, husband, wife, and 2 kids for a week's trip anywhere. So when I say a week's trip, including the weekend, that you've got 2 weekends and then the 5 days in between. Plan that trip for a family of 4, and you tell me how much does it cost? It will not cost you lesser than $1,000 a day. So for a 9-day or 8-day vacation, it pretty much costs you $10,000. The bare minimum I'm telling you is the minimum. How many trips you can do it? 1, 2, 3, 4. How many? I mean, I'm talking from an average person's perspective. How much does an average person save in Canada? Nothing. It's a zero. With 1% working in Canada, the savings are zero, or they can be even negative. If there are 2 people working, then you can save a little bit. One person is running the show. The second person saves a bit, depending on how much they earn and how much they save. Even if you save $3,000 or $4,000 a month, with 2 people working full time, how much have you actually saved in the full year? $35,000 to $40,000 with 2 people working full time in good jobs.
Yeah.
And how much does it cost to have a vacation overseas? One vacation costs $10,000. How many vacations can you actually afford? Think about it. And if you're one person working, you have absolutely no money. Forget about vacation or travel. You've got no money. Absolutely nothing. You cannot even take one flight back to India to visit your family.
Yeah.
So when you come back to India, just bear it in mind that you're coming to a country that has a fairly good education system, and with it comes the heritage, the culture, and the schooling is not about going to school. It's about learning from the system. It's learning from the people, and it's learning from it's just learning just the general way of life of that country. And by nature, Indians and Asians are polite, and because I've lived both in Asia Pacific, I lived in West. I could tell you there's a major difference in attitude of people in both these parts of the world. Asians in general, not just Indians, but Asians, whether you talk about Malaysians or you talk about Indonesians or you talk about Japanese, they are all polite people. They are very polite. On the other hand, look at the Western world. They are not. They tend to be a lot impolite. They are rude. And in terms of civilization, look at the East. Talking of India, talking of Japan, they have that civilization. These are ancient civilizations. They have got the culture, they've got the heritage. There's a lot to learn from this. India is an old country. Look at that. Remember that, right? There's a lot to learn from this. So education is not about just going to a school and learning what the school teaches you. And I hear there's little to learn. So think about it and just be positive.
Oh, yeah. Thanks a lot, Himanshu, for sharing your thoughts, especially like, the mental stability and also the pros and cons, I think, as you described, and being, in the country that, in your own country and accepting it. So with that, yeah, thank you very much for taking the time and sharing your thoughts and journey with us. I really appreciate you spending the time with us today.
Thanks, Avinash. I really appreciate the time you've taken to arrange this call, and wish you good luck.
Yeah.
And I hope this video did this.
Thank you all for joining us on this insightful journey of Desi Return. If you enjoyed this episode and want to explore more stories and expert advice, make sure to subscribe and hit the notification bell. Don't forget to leave a comment below with your thoughts and experiences. By the way, check out the links in the description below for our Facebook group and social media for updates and engaging discussions, as well as connecting with fellow Desi Returners. Thank you once again, and until next time, may your Desi Return journey be filled with joy, growth, and endless possibilities.